Adjunct Professor Moran, Macroeconomics 111. In this session, we are studying the effects of fiscal policy. Now that we can do that as a result of the prior video with expansionary and contractionary fiscal policy effect on the budget deficit or surplus and the resulting impact on the debt. The national unemployment rate rises to 12%. Which economic scenario would that give us? Inflation or recession? This would result in a recession. The objective for aggregate demand would be to increase aggregate demand. How can the government do that with fiscal policy? The appropriate policy would be personal income minus personal income taxes equals disposable income, which is then consumed or saved. Consumption is one of the four variables of aggregate demand. So by lowering taxes, they would increase disposable income and cause both consumption and savings to rise. That would cause an increase in aggregate demand. If, however, the government chose instead to resort to government spending, they would want to increase government spending. Remember that the four components of aggregate demand are C, I, G, and XN. So by increasing anything on this side of the equation, we'll increase this side. In a recessionary scenario, our supply is fixed in the short run. We would want to shift the aggregate demand curve into the intermediate range of the average supply curve and take us from a recessionary level to a full employment level of GDP. The price level would respond by increasing a little bit as we approach full employment, a higher rate of inflation. Now, if the government either decreases taxes or increases spending, given starting at a balanced budget, this would result in deficit spending, and if the government borrowed the money, it would increase the debt. Inflation is strong at the rate of 14%. Well, that's an inflationary scenario. And we want to decrease aggregate demand. So in this scenario, would be graphed like this. A short-run aggregate supply with an aggregate demand curve in either above the level of full employment or in the vertical range. And our goal here would be to reduce aggregate demand into the intermediate range, resulting in a lower level of inflation. This is GDP sub I for inflation, and this would be GDP sub FE for full employment. So how can the government make aggregate demand decrease? Well, either by causing consumers to spend less or government spending less. So if the government reduces taxes, personal income minus personal income taxes equals disposable income, which is then consumed or saved. The government can raise taxes, lowering disposable income, causing both consumption and savings to fall. That component of aggregate demand would fall, causing what's on this side of the equilibrium, the identity, to this to fall. Reducing, or the government could do this directly by reducing government spending. That would result in a budgetary surplus, which would, if used to pay down the debt, would reduce the federal debt. Survey shows consumers are losing confidence in the economy. Retail sales are weak, and business inventories are increasing rapidly. Okay, remember that wealth, indebtedness, taxes, and expectations can shift an aggregate demand curve with respect to consumption. This would indicate a recession is approaching. So the government would want to undertake expansionary fiscal policy. So they would want to decrease taxes, which would increase consumption. Or they could increase government spending directly, which would result in a deficit and an increase in public debt if the money is borrowed. Business sales and investment are expanding rapidly, and economists think inflation lies ahead. This would be an inflationary scenario, in which case we'd want to undertake a contractionary fiscal policy. So you would want to reduce aggregate demand. To do so, you would want to reduce consumption. You could do that by increasing taxes, cause consumption to fall, or the government could do it directly by reducing spending. That would result in a surplus, which if used to pay down the debt, would lower the debt. Inflation persists while unemployment remains high. This is the third economic scenario that the simple Keynesian aggregate expense model could not handle. That looks like this. This is cost-push inflation, also known as stagflation. Let's say you're originally at a full employment equilibrium and a supply shock occurred, maybe an increase in the price of oil. The aggregate supply curve would shift to the left. That would cause a lower level of GDP full employment, and this is GDP recession, and this is price level full employment, and this is the resulting price level of our supply shock. All right. Notice that in our regular recession, unemployment gets worse, but inflation should go down. Here, though, in this recessionary situation, stagflation, cost-push inflation, all three variables get worse. GDP falls, unemployment increases, and the rate of inflation goes up. So what you do here would depend on whether you think inflation is more important or unemployment is more important. You will have a trade-off in either of these. If you cause aggregate demand to rise in order to fight unemployment, although you'll get more GDP, you will not fight inflation and may cause more inflation. You'll cause more inflation. There'll be a trade-off. You go from this equilibrium to this equilibrium. So there'll be more GDP, but a higher rate of inflation. However, if you try to fight inflation, you would take a contractionary fiscal policy and push aggregate demand to the left, in which case you get less inflation, but you would make unemployment worse. There would be a trade-off that would result as a consequence. In this handout, we're going to practice recognizing whether a policy is an automatic or discretionary fiscal policy, and whether it is meant to fight a recession, expansionary, or inflation, contractionary. An automatic stabilizer is a change in G or T that happens automatically because it's on the books and stays there. And so when economic conditions change, it changes immediately. But a discretionary fiscal policy is one that is passed by Congress to fight a specific economic problem. Okay, the example, a recession raises the amount of unemployment compensation. When a recession happens and aggregate demand shifts to the left, then output falls and workers get laid off and income falls. Many of those workers will qualify for unemployment insurance. That is on the books. It will happen automatically. And when those people, instead of getting no income, now collect income from unemployment, that is expansionary. The government cuts personal income tax rates. If this is a one-time cut to solve a recession, as Obama did in the 2008 recession, then that would be discretionary, and it would be expansionary. The government eliminates favorable tax treatment on long-term capital gains. If this tax cut is going to be on the books forever, going forward, then at first you could consider it discretionary, but now it is going to in fact be automatic in the future, and it would be expansionary. Incomes rise. As a result, people pay a higher fraction of their income in taxes. The United States has a progressive tax code. The more you make, you pay more in dollars, but you also pay more as a percentage. That's an automatic stabilizer. If we're at full employment and income rises, we may go into the vertical range, causing higher rates of inflation. By taxing people as their income rises at a higher rate, you dampen the shift to the right, which would reduce inflationary pressure. And that is contractionary. As a result of a recession, more families qualify for food stamps and welfare benefits. These are on the books, so when we slide into recession, more people qualify automatically, and it will expand the economy. When the economy grows and unemployment falls, fewer people will qualify for food stamps and welfare benefits, and that will avoid pushing us into the inflationary range above full employment and vertical range. The government eliminates the deductibility of interest expenses for tax purposes. Okay, that is in effect a tax increase, and at first it's discretionary, but then in subsequent years you can consider it automatic, and it's contractionary, because disposable income will be falling as a result of an increase in taxes, which would cause consumption to fall, and that's contractionary since consumption is one of the four variables of aggregate demand. The government launches a major new space program to explore Mars. That's a discretionary program. They voted specifically for that. It's not on the books. It's not permanent legislation. And it would be expansionary, as the government would hire more workers and contractors to develop the program. The government raises Social Security taxes. In your paycheck is, when you look at your paycheck, there's about 7.65% deducted for Social Security and Medicare tax. By increasing that amount, you have less take-home pay left. You have less discretionary income. That is discretionary in the first year and automatic if left on the books, and then it's contractionary. Corporate profits increase. As a result, the government collects more corporate income taxes. That is discretionary first year, automatic afterwards, and it is contractionary. Less money would be paid to entrepreneurs who own corporations. The government raises corporate income taxes. Okay, that would be, again, be discretionary first year, and if left on the books, automatic, and it would be contractionary as the government is reducing income by taxing at a higher rate. The government gives all its employees a large pay raise. Obviously, we are no longer in economics class. We are now in English fiction. All right, that would be discretionary first year, and it would be on the books. It would be automatic. Oh, it's a one-time thing, so that would be discretionary only, and then that would be expansionary. A little practice with fiscal policy, both in classifying it as discretionary and automatic, and its impact as expansionary and contractionary, as well as seeing the consequences of expansionary and contractionary fiscal policy on the budget and the debt, which will impact its effectiveness, which will be subject of a next video.